All right, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? Bienvenido de Puerto Rico. Es la mañana. Yo soy en Puerto Rico en el verano. Está sábado. Yo soy cansado. Pero yo pondré un focus porque yo no quiero los textos llegar. All right, here we go. 6.3, climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. I do have to start off by telling you, IB loves to compare and contrast, evaluate, etc. All those like high mark questions. Basically, they want you to differentiate between mitigation and adaptation. So, of different cultures. They want, because the thing that you have to know the difference between mitigation and adaptation, and obviously just be able to compare like the good things and the rough things about different cultures. So they want you to define these on the pages of 546 to 556 or by any other means. Sorry, dismiss. There we go. So they want you to define these: mitigation, adaptation, convection, protocol, decarbonization, adaptive capacity. So big ones there are probably mitigation, adaptation to understand the differences. But yeah, the other ones they use quite a bit as well. Global action on climate change. So the global cooperation is essential to prevent catastrophic climate change. The reason is because it's not as if when you with climate change is pollution and fossil fuel use and greenhouse gases. It's not as if it just stays right there with you and it only affects you. It affects everything around you. It's a global consequence sort of thing. So the UN has urged action for over 30 years, focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, especially carbon. So carbon's been the main focus, obviously. Nations act at different paces. Those with larger carbon footprints have more responsibility. They also, in theory, would have more ability to act quicker, too. Individual actions matter. Everything we do matters. When you throw out a plastic cup instead of putting it in recycling, that has an effect. So, UN conventions. And no, back to that though for a second. Individual actions matter. I try not to do the shame thing. Like, why? Because nobody likes it. I never liked it. But like, it's always just looking to do one thing, better. And like a lot of the things you can do to help out the environment actually save you money. Like I always use the example of like, I don't use a clothes dryer. I hang dry my clothes, and that keeps my clothes a lot longer. Keeps them like the black's making more, like it pops them like longer so they don't turn to gray, like that dull gray. And it saves a ton of money too. So yeah, just keep that in mind, especially for like I know you guys are students, but when you get your own apartment, if you got a clothes washer, that's a good thing, but you don't really need a clothes dryer. So UN conventions, Rio Conventions from 1992 Earth Summit addresses climate change, biodiversity, desertification. So that's been a recent convention. I know it was over 30 years ago, but this includes UNFCCC, climate change, CBD, biological diversity, all right, UNCCD, combat desertification. So UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The goal is to stabilize greenhouse gas levels to avoid dangerous climate change and tipping points. So this allows ecosystems to adapt and support sustainable development. As ratified by 199 countries, parties to the convention, and UNFCCC, Conference and Agreements. The COP, Conference of the Parties, annual meeting of the countries under the UNFCCC. COP28 was held in Dubai in 2023. So it's amazing they picked like one of the most bougie places around for it, right? Yeah, take that one off the expense account. All right, Paris Agreement in 2015. Let me get down here. Right there looks good. All right. aims to limit climate temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the most current and major treaty under the UNFCCC. Where do the last two presidents stand on the Paris agreements, and what are their reasons? I want you to look that up. All right. Currently, President Trump, Paris Agreement 2025. Let's see. News. Yep, there you go. So, yep. All right, so there's one look at it. But the Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer, 1987, is one of the most successful international agreements on a major environmental issue. Discuss the validity of this statement. So when you're discussing this, you want to talk about the CFCs and how they're used in aerosols, plastic, pesticides, flame retardants, refrigerants. You can talk about ozone destruction and reformation. You can talk about ozone holes, management strategies for them, and like talk about the laws that we put in place, legislation and implementation, just as far as like CFCs, HCFCs. You can talk about how there's a black market for ozone depleting substances, like all those old refrigerants, CFCs. Basically, when they drain out a refrigerator, they can take that and then sell it off on the black market, or just as like used refrigerant, so that old systems can continue to run, or they can put it through a plant and then cleans it, and then they can still use it. So different things. Other international environmental agreements, like you can talk about the Kyoto, Paris Agreement, COP, CITES, Rio, stuff like that. Link a range of the strategies. Like, so don't just word puke. Like, if you can actually talk out this, then how it relates to this, which relates to that, that'd be a good thing to do with this. Talk about alternatives to CFCs, such as HCFCs. Talk about how like they're used with gas-blown plastics, halogenated pesticides, propellants, aerosols, and just things like that. Give a balanced analysis. Show how there's international cooperation, and talk about how this is probably the big stuff you have to talk about. Talk with the balance analysis. Talk about the international cooperation. You have to, pretty much. Talk about the speed and extent of the ozone recovery. All right. Talk about how in some ways it's good, in some ways it's slow. Talk about the alternatives. To a lot of these ozone depleting substances. Talk about comparing with other national, international agreements. So, and then form a conclusion at the end. That's probably the way to go about this. So, some of those international agreements they want you to talk about are down below here. Kyoto Protocol. This was adopted in December 11th, 1997, entered into force February 2005. So you can see how there's a delay of 8 years. This is focused on binding greenhouse gas reduction targets for developing countries, HICs. HICs are high income countries. So why do we do that? Because really what allows countries like the United States and other economically developed countries to really prosper monetarily is our use of fossil fuels and just how it really puts out greenhouse gases. Introduced in Annex B, differentiated obligations for countries. So different countries have different obligations. So you can probably differentiate between fair and equitable for that. International emissions trading was introduced in this agreement, in the protocol. Targets the average of 5% emission reductions from 1990 levels, 2008 to 12 period. The Doha Amendment in 2012 extended Kyoto Protocol to 2020. There's a new goal of an 18% reduction in greenhouse gases compared to 1990 levels of 144 countries. Entered into force in 2020. There's the sorry, guys. I know I'm like reading off these. I'm not expanding much into them. But the more I expand into them, the less you're probably going to remember about them. So, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. This is established by the UN and WMO in 1988. The purpose is to provide scientific assessment on climate change. Less emotion, more just straight up facts. Membership, 195 countries, has produced 6 assessments reports so far. Key views are that from Christiana Figueres, UN Climate Secretariat, emphasizes the need for collaboration over punishment for effective climate action. That's probably pretty big, okay? So it emphasizes the need to work together versus to penalize countries. So criticisms, lack of legal enforcement in agreements, especially Paris, could lead to weak implementation. It's one of the things that President Trump brought up, and it's actually kind of true. I know Christina Figueres thinks that there should be less punishment. For me, I think that you kind of need a little bit of the carrot and the stick, meaning that like you need incentives for countries to really decarbonize, but you also need punishments as well. All right. And Trump brings that up, and it is kind of true. They're like, hey, look, if you don't meet your goal, what happens to you? Nothing. So you could promise the moon and the stars. Sounds great. Looks great for political reasons. Are you actually going to achieve it? Yet you could take not one step towards it. So that is true. Potential for deals to become toothless due to vague promises. And that's what I talk about. Hey, I can promise you the sun, moon, and the stars. And it'll never come true. Yep. EU perspective. Supports a pledge and review system. National commitments reassessed every 5 years. Goal. Halve global emissions by 2050. Strategies to alleviate climate change. Options. Do nothing, wait and see, or take action now. All right. Those are your 3 options. Do nothing is some people's thing. They're like, hey, they think it's a myth. Some people are like, hey, there's not enough data, let's wait and see. Those ones tend to be far and few in between. It's more like very polarized. And then there's take action now, people. Science can't predict with 100% certainty, but evidence supports action. So, consensus accepts climate change is real and urgent. So the majority of people do believe in it. So, and TOK, to what extent do political leaders and officials have the authority to prioritize economic development over environmental degradation? So, why do political leaders have, like, to what extent do they value economics, like money, over the environment? So, the precautionary principle, act now just in case, preferred strategy. Waiting too long can lead to reaching a tipping point where effects are irreversible. So, yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point where you just dug yourself into a hole. I mean, looking back on, it's horrible to say, but look back on freshman year. I mean, you saw people that dug themselves into a hole with their grades, and then they tried to bring it up like they did in middle school, like in quarter 4. And I thought, no, mija, couldn't do it. Like, you repeated the course. So yeah, you wait too long, man, and it's just, you're done. It's like trying to win a basketball game when you're down by like 30 points, and there's like 5 minutes left. Bro, grab a shower. Get them next time. Precautions fall into international commitments and national actions, personal lifestyle changes. So, yeah, this one's huge. Little things like personal lifestyle changes. Never underestimate the power of your buying. All right, purchasing power. It had, like, voting matters, but so does where you put your money. I wear Patagonia clothing. Why do I wear Patagonia clothing? Because I put my money into a company that really prioritizes the environment, I feel. So, don't get me wrong, this shirt right here, not Patagonia. All right, synthetic material too. So it's probably definitely petroleum based, but like it's also giving it for free. So, I mean, I've held on to it now for, oh dang, over 10 years. So, yeah. And decarbonization. Going down here for this one. Yeah. Replace high carbon systems with low zero carbon alternatives. Yeah, electric vehicles. Are they carbon free? Absolutely not. They weren't made by miracles and they don't run on unicorn tears. Like a lot of the electricity you get to run an electric vehicle comes from burning propane, or like, sorry, natural gas, which produces a lot of methane. But overall, electric vehicles put out less emissions than gasoline cars. Strategies: switch to low carbon electricity, use more electric transportation. Um, yeah, develop energy storage technology. That's huge with batteries. Improve energy efficiency as well. Energy efficient appliances. Here in Puerto Rico, I can talk to you quite a bit about it because a lot of the houses, they've switched to low carbon electricity, they switched to solar power. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, the power company down here is horrible. They're just unreliable. So with solar power, I feel like people have more control over the electricity. Also, too, when there's a hurricane, as long as your solar panels are okay, or if you protect them somehow and they're okay, then you're good to go after a hurricane. Especially use more electric transport. A lot of Tesla cars down here, a lot of electric vehicles. Why? Because you don't have to travel far, and after a hurricane, if you can get just a little bit of electricity from your roof to your car, you're not relying on the gas stations to be open. Develop energy storage technology. Yep. Also seems one they got generators down here in Puerto Rico, but a lot of those Tesla wall mount battery things too. Improve energy efficiency. So yeah, just using energy efficient appliances. Heat pumps are a big thing. If I was living down here, I'd have to look at it because it sounds as if you need a heat pump really to heat down here. But I do see a lot of split unit heat pumps, so I have to look into that. The efficiency for cooling of a heat pump versus an air conditioner. Reducing emissions from food production. Reduce meat and dairy, especially in high income countries. Yeah. Eating less red meat, by the way, it does also have a lot of health benefits for you as well, as far as lowering your cholesterol. Chicken is going to give you pretty much just the same amount of protein level and really has less environmental impact and it's better for your health. Promote low carbon meat, grass fed. Yep. Ooh, that's interesting. Grass fed beef versus corn fed. Yeah. Ooh, yeah, that actually has quite a bit to do with it. Improve crop yields, vertical farming. We do this at our school. So, yep. Use your sun wisely. Reduce food waste. So, it's this concept that mankind wastes quite a bit. Nature wastes nothing. So, think of it like this: a lot of your food scraps can go off to feed pigs, go off to feed other livestock potentially. You can compost very easily the fruit and vegetable waste, and then you have like fresh soil, which combats desertification. So, mitigation strategies: reduce greenhouse gases or remove them after they're produced. So, reduce emissions of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. So, again, I can't stress this enough. This is a mitigation strategy. So, remove carbon dioxide via afforestation, rewilding, carbon capture systems, geoengineering. So, basically, you're still going to be producing carbon dioxide, but it's basically a ways of reabsorbing it, increasing those. Reduce greenhouse gases. Yep. Yep. All right. Right here. Reduce carbon dioxide, reduce nitrous oxides. Different ways of doing that, by the way. Reduce methane from agriculture. Alternative fuels in fossil use subsidies. So, a lot of the agricultural equipment runs off of fossil fuels, which then produce greenhouse gases. Finding other ways to do it. There's actually inventive ways that some farmers have done where they use cow manure, where the methane that comes from it, yeah, it's still a greenhouse gas, but it's one they collect there on their property, and they actually fuel some of their equipment with it, and it's really pretty cool. Farmers are pretty smart, and I don't really think they do it so much. I guess they do it for the environment, so it's still there for them, so they can produce crops, but it also ways to save money. Use energy efficiently. Yep. Just with how you're using it and farm. Renewable energy. Very good. Obviously farming involves sun. So there's different things like here in Puerto Rico, I saw a cow farm, but they had an area set up where it was covered by solar panels and the cows were underneath it. Why? Because it's quite a bit cooler temperature-wise. Cooler cows produce more milk, by the way. Adopt carbon pricing. So, yep. Encourage public lifestyle shifts. Right now I'm filming this and I'm in a non-air conditioned room because it's in the morning and it's not bad temperature wise here in Puerto Rico. They also design houses down here where they take advantage of cross breezes and have walls and stuff that cool with tile and shade for patios, things like that. So, improve agriculture and landfill methane capture. So, yeah, improving methane capture is huge because they do it already with cow poop and they harness it for energy. So, remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. CDR, carbon dioxide removal. Increase photosynthesis, aka reforestation and rewilding. Trees absorb a ton of carbon. So just planting more trees will actually do quite a bit. When you hear about carbon offsets, I always thought they were kind of a lie. And, I looked it up one time. And really, if you plant like a maple tree, depending on the maple tree, it offsets flying, in economy class from New York City to Los Angeles and back. You could do that 4 times just on one tree that you plant. So, yeah, so that's quite a bit to do. All right, improve agricultural landfill. Reduce carbon removal, increase photosynthesis, reforestation, rewilding. CCS in BECCS, store carbon dioxide underground or in biomass. So, yep. Geoengineering, hydroelectric dams, nuclear power, wind turbines, solar panels, EVs. So, let's get back to CCS. So, I have to look up more about BECCS. So that's more about with the biomass, I imagine. But like CCS, what it does is when electricity like you burn oil, or you can burn, like biomass. Say like you can burn invasive species like Japanese knotweed. Burn it, but instead of the emissions going up above in the atmosphere, you take the emissions and stuff them back underground, like in a cave almost. And you store them underground, and over time they basically just become fossil fuels again. So, geoengineering, hydroelectric dams. A lot of Europe has quite a bit of dams. We do too, for power and as the water flows through. The thing about it is that has an environmental impact on the river. So, nuclear power actually, The problem with nuclear power, there's two things. One, if there's an accident, it's highly unlikely, but especially when you compare it to like oil spills, which are much more likely. But if it does happen, it usually goes pretty bad. Also, to the nuclear waste, it takes a really long time to degrade, and although there's less of it, and we store it underground in probably some cave in Nevada, um, it's there for a really long time. So, wind turbines, great. I've heard some things about wind turbines that like I wasn't sure about. I was underneath a wind turbine. I did like an ATV tour, and one of the spots you stop is this wind farm. The wind turbines were huge. Each blade was longer than an 18 wheeler, and they would come down, and it would be literally right above you. Like you look up, felt like 15 feet, and there's the blade going by. And if you had closed your eyes, you couldn't hear it. Like literally, I can hear the birds and the frogs out here more than I can like the wind, this huge wind turbine that's turning. So they don't make a lot of noise. Um, they don't move overly fast either. So as far as birds go, I don't see them really impacting that. I don't see it impacting the whales as much either if they're put off seas. Um, you could talk to me a little bit about how they interfere with bird migration, maybe at night, but really beyond that, I don't see it much. So, and the wind turbine that I was at, it wasn't littered with dead birds underneath. So, you know, encourage, let's go down here. So talk about solar panels. Yep, you know those pretty well. Electric vehicles, those as well. All right. Stabilize or reduce greenhouse gases. Reduce energy consumption. So, this is one that we can all do. Reduce energy consumption. Improve energy efficiency. Better car engines. They're getting quite a bit better. They're getting better about burning all the fuel before it leaves the tailpipe. So, less pollutants. Insulation for houses, appliances, making them so that they run off less electricity, being smarter about it. Reduce demand, right now there's a big thing with washing machines. They basically put a heat exchanger in it, so so it's a combination washer dryer machine, and what it does, it washes your clothes, obviously with less water, which is good for environmental reasons. It uses less fresh water, but then there's less water for it to dry, so it just spin dries it, and it uses basically like a dehumidifier to really dry the clothes instead of producing heat. So it uses a lot less energy to dry your clothes. It's still kind of like my system where I hang dry it and it dries without electricity at all. But hey, that one there, you get rid of your dryer completely. Reduce demand, change behavior, drive less, eat less meat, fly less. So yeah, in Europe, they're basically, I think they're starting to go to a plan where they have less airports, but and they rely more on their train system, which is brilliant because their train system gets you everywhere. And just having like a few major airports, like one in each country, sort of thing. So, drive less. I actually have been riding my bike to work. I rather enjoy it. The days I ride the bike to work, I'm less angry. Helps when I'm grading. So if I'm going to come clean, implement carbon taxes, remove fossil fuel subsidies. So yeah, fossil fuel subsidies is where the government gives money to a sector so it operates cheaper. So they do this with farming. They do this with fossil fuels. They also do it with the alternative energy sector. But it basically allows it to operate. So we have like gas cheaper. So set national greenhouse gas limits and use carbon credit systems. Yep. So if once we in the United States we reach our greenhouse gas limit, then maybe we start paying for reforestation in Brazil or something like that. Which should be a carbon credit. personal carbon credits to encourage reduction. Yeah, that would be interesting to see your carbon footprint and how you lower it. Educate and shift. Actually, here's the thing: you, by living in a city, might actually have less of a carbon footprint if you take the bus and it's just local transportation. It's close versus somebody who lives off in this like huge house in the suburbs who commutes into the city to work every day in their Mercedes Benz. So, educate and shift socioeconomic priorities. City toll charges. Yeah. Think about this a little bit. Like there's old San Juan here in Puerto Rico. It's this major old city, like cobblestone streets that are narrow. It's like, God, man, some of the streets are as narrow as your sidewalk. And there's cars there. It's like, if it was me in charge, I'd make it completely car free. I'd be like, nope, park out in the parking garage on the outside, and you are walking. Too bad. Like the tourist walk when the cruise ships come in, and I would reduce congestion quite a bit and the greenhouse gases in that area. Improve energy production efficiency. Yep, getting more out of what you use. So, reduce nitrous oxides and methane from agriculture. Reduce methane. Change livestock diets. Also, to collect that methane. That way, you could harness it. Capture methane from landfills and from cow manure. Yep. This they actually burn as biogas, by the way. So, not all biogas is. It comes in different environmental levels. Promote sustainable agricultural practices. So, yep. Remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Oh yeah, we talked about these. Sorry, I'm getting lost. Oh no, we didn't. Okay. Increase photosynthesis, reforestation, deforestation, restore grasslands. Carbon capture system, which is what we talked about, is where they stuff that the emissions underground. And then BECCS, which is the biomass version of that, which I have to look up. Carbon capture stores CO2 underground. BECCS is biomass energy plus carbon recapture. So what it does is it's the one that burns like the Japanese knotweed, say, like an invasive species that just is prolific and just regrows like that. Burn it, take the carbon from it, and stuff it underground. And then the Japanese knotweed's going to grow back, and so it's going to absorb carbon. So in a way, you get energy and you reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's really kind of brilliant way of doing it. Biomass fuel, carbon neutral if the same crop is replanted and absorbs CO2. So yeah, say you burn corn stalks, all right, and the carbon goes off in the atmosphere, but you're regrowing corn the next year, so it's going to just absorb all that corn right over again. Geoengineering, large-scale intervention in Earth systems, different from traditional mitigation. Examples. Oceans, this is where we start geoengineering, getting into some crazy like Doctor Strange sort of stuff. So, ocean fertilization, adding iron and nutrients to increase algae. Yep. Sulfur dioxide reflects sunlight. Global dimming, it's like putting little mirrors up in the sky, basically. Oh, speaking of which, mirrors in space deflect solar radiation, so less sunlight coming in. Reflective roofs increase albedo. That one's not so crazy to me. They do it quite a bit they've been doing it for centuries. Why do you paint a roof black or have black shingle tiles or dark shingle tiles when your problem is heat? It's too damn hot. So you paint your roof white, and guess what? It does quite a bit better. Doesn't absorb as much. Adaptation strategies aims to reduce negative climate effects and enhance resilience. Depends on adaptive capacity, resources, plus will to act. Examples. Land use, restrict floodplain development. Yep. Um, a lot of this just goes into like putting houses in smart places, not really building on swampland. So, flood protection, planned water catchments, build on stilts, raised garages. Not a bad way to do it. You see it quite a bit on the beach where they build houses. You'll have a house on stilts, so like basically, if the water comes in, it goes right out underneath. It also makes for a great garage. So, because obviously, hopefully, if there's a hurricane coming, you're not gonna have your car parked underneath your house. You're gonna be getting in your car and getting the heck out and evacuating. So, agriculture, better irrigation, drought-resistant crops, crop diversity, always a good thing. Weather management, seeds for seed clouds, plant trees. So seeding clouds is this like Doctor Strange sort of thing again. It's basically you're putting almost like you go up in a plane or something and you drop off like these little particles that help like clouds form, something to that effect. So mitigation, migration, relocate from vulnerable areas. So yeah, look at the population of Florida and how much that ecosystem can handle, just water wise, land wise, and really there's a certain breaking point. Um, and the thing of my students a few years ago, they were seniors, and I kind of like these guys. These guys were more about money than the environment. I'll come true, but like they were like, sorry, you can't move to Florida. Good luck getting house insurance. It's through the roof. And oh yeah, the company you do get, you're gonna pay like buku bucks for. Whenever there's a hurricane, they're just gonna declare bankruptcy, and then you'll never get your money back. So then they're like with hurricanes increasing down there in strength, it's like, nah, they can't do it. Not economically feasible. Some of them were actually looking towards Texas a little bit more. So let's go this way. Adaptation strategies went off there. Migration. Vaccination. Protect against waterborne diseases. Typhoid. Yep. Because it's going to start looking at a lot of those diseases that are mosquito borne. Mosquitoes are going to be increasing just with global warming. Water supply. Desalination. Don't really look at that as a cure. But hey, some people do. Reservoirs. Probably a good idea to start increasing reservoirs just because reservoirs tend to increase your nature reserves as well and just natural land around it. And you start having more like fresh water just on hand, which is a big commodity that our world seems to be running out of. Cloud water harvesting. I don't know what that is, but I'll check that up possibly. NAPA, National Adaptation Programs of Action, submitted by LICs to UNFCCCs to highlight urgent adaptation needs. Example, Bangladesh includes sea level rise, monsoons, drought, flood shelters, irrigation. So, UN fund supports these, though funding is limited. So, yep. More response to climate change, economic pricing, carbon subsidies for renewables, fossil fuel tariffs. So, giving kind of like people a reason to be more environmental. So, carbon pricing, you do this a little bit with like cars right now in the United States. There's like a higher price you pay on cars. There's like a additional tax or whatever for cars that are not really high on miles per gallon. So government's giving money to renewable energy sectors so that they can make things cheaper. Fossil fuel tariffs. So, yep, selling that hits more. It would increase the price of your gasoline and oil. Legislation, international, national, or community based. Goal setting, CSR, B corporations, company policies. Lifestyle, solar panels. Told you they use them quite a bit here in Puerto Rico. reduced heating, air conditioning. Something I wonder a little bit just with growing up, like we didn't grow up with an air conditioner, and then we got one, and it was just for one room. So during those really hot days in summer, we would all pile into the room, and I remember if we misbehaved as children, my father would literally throw us out, and then you just got to be roasted alive. So, um, a dietary change as well. Diet has quite a bit to do also with heat. Like I'm in Puerto Rico right now. In Puerto Rico, there's like asopao, which is a soup, and carne guisada, which is a beef stew. And I gotta be honest with you, I want nothing to do with those. Um, it's too darn hot, and when it's like over 90 degrees, who wants a beef stew? Not me. I tend to want more salads and stuff. So when I'm down here, I eat a ton of fruit, ton of vegetables, which really lowers my body heat. Um, Also helps me stay skinny. Reduce travel. I don't know. I think of this more with like daily commute. Live close to where you work. Reason I say that is because of like commuting sucks. It really does. And like if you can commute, um, the less you have to do it, the better. I'm a huge fan of remote work. I really am. I think people are. I know there's people that hate it, but when I had to do it, found a lot of joy in it. So, define carbon neutrality, page 560, or by other means. Um, Impact of the let's go right here. Impact of the UNFCCC. Goal: stabilize greenhouse gases to prevent climate interference. IPCC creates scenarios, SSPs, to show possible futures. Focus on carbon neutrality by 2050. Good lofty goal to have. Scenarios from the 6th IPCC report 2021. Scenario SSP1, sustainability. 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. Optimistic, sustainable growth, equity increases. So, that's how much they're looking to reduce the temperature by. Middle of the road is by 1.8 degrees Celsius by 20. Actually, that's so. What that is they're looking to limit the temperature increase to just a mere 1.5 degrees Celsius. They're not looking to really reduce it to where it is. It's just going to get warmer. It's just they're trying to make it less warmer. Middle of the road is 1.8 degrees Celsius by 2100. So delayed net zero, moderate optimism. Regional rivalry, 2.7 degrees Celsius by 2100. Progress is slow. Income inequality persists. Fortunately, that's looking likely. Inequality, 3.6 degrees Celsius by 2100. National security focus, emissions double. Fossil fuel development, 4.4 degrees Celsius by 2100. Worst case scenario, fossil fuel growth dominates. And it will right up until we've used all your fossil fuels. Remember, they take millions of years to make, and we go through them in an instant. I'm not a math teacher, but that's non-sustainable. Impact of technology helps mitigate climate change. Tools, apps. Apps are huge. Apps, like you use one probably if you drive, you start looking at where the traffic is congested and you avoid it. Why? For your time, but also too, that's going to use less fossil fuels. Smart city tech, EV charging, recycling, public transportation, all of these peer-to-peer markets. So that's interesting. I think that has a lot to do with kind of like Amazon in a way. Less middleman, less transportation of goods. More on geoengineering, radical proposals, space reflectors. So, yep, that's the Doctor Strange stuff. Cloud reflectiveness, yep, another Doctor Strange one. Stratospheric aerosols, that actually a little bit less. Get into that next time. GGR, BECCS. This one is we've already covered. It's like Really pretty cool. Ocean fertilization, Doctor Strange. Ambient air capture, Doctor Strange. Alkaline minerals, ground limestone. Challenges in combating climate change. You still got climate deniers out there. It's hard to really battle that, but we try. Limited funding and planning. Why it's not a sexy sell to people. Basically, they're like, hey, you got to do less bougie lifestyle, more sustainable lifestyle. People aren't about that. Weak leadership across all sectors. Yeah, no one wants to hear it. No one wants to be told that they've got this major problem going on. Hey, for what it's worth, no one likes to be told they're having a heart attack either. Global inequality. Yep. So, just how you have some areas that it's hard to talk to somebody in Brazil about how important the environment is when they're having trouble eating or putting food on the table for their family. So, generational and geographic differences in perspective. Old people don't change as easily. I'm watching it with my mother in law. And even myself, actually. There's some things that are changing. I'm like that old crabby guy. Get off my lawn! There's like, so I watch it with old people with recycling. They really just don't recycle. They don't know anything about it. They don't know how. It's just one extra thing, one step when they're just trying to survive their life and not decay more. So, geographic differences in perspective as well. Here in Puerto Rico, recycling is not as big as it is in the States. And in the States, it's not as big as it is in Japan, in some other countries. More on perspective on climate change. Views on climate action vary by individual society based on necessity, practicality, and urgency. Discuss how environmental ethics influence approaches to achieving a sustainable future. Yep. Talk about how people value basically the environment and how that is likely for a sustainable future. Tragedy of the commons and climate change. Tragedy of the commons is huge. The atmosphere is shared globally. One nation's pollution harms all. But in a way that's tragic because like you can do all this polluting and then it gets spread out. So it's kind of like you and a bunch of other people go out to eat, but you know the bill's going to get shared. So you just go hog and eat as much as you can. So, while climate action restoration by one benefits all. Yep. COP27 in Egypt. Hey, better this time than going off to Dubai. All right. Egypt gets affected quite a bit with climate change. So I like that they had it there more. Agreed to create a loss and damage fund to support LICs affected by climate impacts. Estimated costs 160 to 340 billion per year by 2030. Debate over wording: phase down versus phase out fossil fuels. So, yep. Final agreement called for urgent, deep, and sustained cuts to greenhouse gases to stay below the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming Paris Agreement goal. So, yep, everybody, that's it. That's 6.3 for you. So, my best. Adios. Bye.